and thank you all very much for coming out tonight. It's my privilege to be here tonight to talk about this unfortunate disease, but it's something that I have an interest in because I have an interest in anaphylaxis, and so we're going to talk about alpha-gal. And I've already had a good introduction, so I'm not going to introduce myself again. I'm Dr. Les Suplet. I do practice up the road in Campbellsville. I do have offices throughout Louisville as well, but the closest I come down here is in Campbellsville. And just so that you all know, I do have a tie down here. I do have family that grew up in Coburg and Cane Valley, so I'm kind of even though I'm a city boy, I do have country roots. So what is alpha-gal? Alpha-gal is a sugar that basically that is found in mammals, but not in primates. So as humans and other higher primates like chimps and gorillas, we don't make alpha-gal, but all other mammals do. So cows, sheep, pigs, cats, dogs, they all produce alpha-gal, also known as galactose alpha-1,3 galactose. And basically it's this sugar molecule that's linked together in this special chemical formation that is only seen in mammals. And so why is that important? Well, as something foreign to us, we can produce an allergic response to something we don't make. And so how are we exposed to alpha-gal? Well, it was first recognized in 2009 by a group of allergists in University of Virginia who were actually looking at delayed anaphylaxis and a colon cancer drug. And what they found that there was this population of people that were in the southeast that were having delayed anaphylaxis after taking a particular colon cancer drug. But what they also saw were these patients also had delayed anaphylaxis after eating red meat. And so they started developing this hypothesis that, okay, there's something in this chemotherapy drug that is also seen in red meat, and one of the common things they found was alpha-gal. And so the next thing that happened, unfortunately, in the lab, was there was a avid hiker who was working in the lab, went out several weekends, got eaten up by ticks, and later develops alpha-gal allergy. And so it just happened out of coincidence that in this lab where they're doing the research that someone developed alpha-gal allergy who had never been exposed to the chemotherapy drug. And because of that, they were able to create this link between the tick bites and alpha-gal. And since that time, they've further developed this hypothesis that here we are, the tick bites their host, a cow, a deer, some other mammal, and then when it bites us, it injects that sugar molecule, alpha-gal, into us, which in certain people allows an allergic response. Because again, when you're allergic to something, your immune system sees something that is different from us and starts to develop antibodies called IgE that make you allergic. We don't really understand why some people get this and others don't. But what we do know that is if you have, quote, allergy, whether it's seasonal allergy or asthma, you're more likely to develop some type of food allergy. And in this case, yeah, you can develop alpha-gal. So on this slide, though, you can kind of see the main culprit, which is the Lonestar tick. It's this nice, these are big pictures, but you know, here's kind of the life cycle, and the Lonestar tick gets its name because it's got that nice little dot on the back of an adult female. These guys have had their blood meal, they're well engorged, probably been on that poor dog. But just to give you all some reference in size and how tiny these guys can be, there's the adult female who is kind of the largest on the head of a quarter. These guys are tiny. So if anybody's ever been eaten up by sea ticks, these guys are really tiny. You know, you can get multiple bites by multiple ticks, which also probably increases your risk of developing allergy, because we think that for some reason, the more you're kind of exposed, the more likely you are to develop the allergy. So even sugar bites now have been identified as a potential source of actually developing alpha-gal. So these are kind of just some general pictures that people have. This poor gentleman looks like he's been eaten up by sea ticks. Probably was walking out barefoot in his yard. Here is an attached tick. And this is an attached tick that's been actually embedded for a while. And if you notice, there's this nice angular or circular area of redness. And so the majority of people that go on to develop alpha-gal actually have some localized reaction at the site where they're bitten. And so we think that that starts the process of actually developing the allergy. Not everybody gets this, but a large percentage of people that have actually been bitten by a tick get this large kind of local inflammatory response, kind of like you would with poison ivy. You know, it gets really red, gets really itchy, gets kind of inflamed at the site where they're bitten by a tick. And we think what happens is that local area starts the process in the immune system to start to develop alpha-gal allergy. So what's unique about alpha-gal allergy as opposed to other food allergy is that it's very delayed. Anybody in the room know anybody that has like peanut allergy? Because that's one of the most common food allergies that we see as allergists. I mean, that affects about food allergy in the general population is about 1 in 13 kids. So peanut by far is the most common we see right now. But what traditional food allergy looks like is you eat a specific food, let's say peanut butter, and usually within the first 15 minutes, you develop hives and flushing, plus coughing and wheezing, hives and flushing, plus vomiting and diarrhea. It's some combination of symptoms, which we call anaphylaxis or a systemic reaction, meaning whole body. But what is different with alpha-gal, and it probably has to do with where the sugar is found. It's found mainly in the fats. There is this delayed response. You eat this nice steak dinner, and somewhere between 3 and 6 hours later, then you start to develop symptoms. You develop kind of hives and flushing, and most people develop vomiting and diarrhea. But you can have coughing and wheezing. You can have all three, hives, coughing, wheezing, vomiting, and diarrhea. I've had the unfortunate privilege of taking care of someone that has actually had syncope or passed out from this. While there's been no reported cases of fatal anaphylaxis that I know of from alpha-gal allergy, I have seen where it has been near fatal. So this isn't anything to take lightly because it can be near fatal or fatal in the wrong circumstances. But again, what is different than for most food allergy is this delayed process. You eat the meat, you eat that sausage, you eat the bacon, and sometime afterwards, you develop whole body symptoms. What are signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis? Well, there's lots of them. So you kind of break them down into different parts of the body. So the most common is going to be skin. So our cutaneous symptoms. So that can look like hives, which is a fancy word for, which doctors call urticaria. It's a fancy word for hives. Itching, flushing, like red as a beet. Angioedema, like Angelina lips, you get these big swelling, you get swelling of the extremities. For respiratory symptoms, it's going to be coughing, wheezing, chest tightness, and shortness of breath. For GI symptoms, which we see more commonly with alpha-gal, it's going to be that severe abdominal cramping, vomiting, diarrhea, that gotta go diarrhea. And then in rare cases, we're going to get that hypertension, that drop in blood pressure, feeling like you're dizzy, feeling lightheaded, feeling like you're going to pass out. And then in rare cases, we get headache, more central nervous system reactions, tunnel vision. And then there's also something we look at in research that's called impending doom. I know that sounds really, why would people have impending doom? Well, if you ask people that have had anaphylaxis, Impending doom just means that they just feel like something bad is going to happen to them. That's exactly what they say. They feel like they don't know what's happening, but something bad is happening to them. They feel like they're going to die. They feel like something bad's going to happen to them. It's this feeling of dread, which we call in research impending doom. So how do we diagnose alpha-gal? Well, unfortunately, most people have their reaction before they see me. And so if you do have a reaction, most of these people and most patients probably have gone to the ER, or they wrote it out, because most anaphylaxis doesn't kill you, and that's a good thing, and have seen their family physician. And they've talked about it. And if you see a physician that recognizes it, because it's now more common than not, then hopefully they're going to send them to me. I'm a board-certified allergist who can, with the help of taking a really good history, what did you eat, how long was it before you had symptoms, get the history, because history is the most important, and then we look at the blood work. Because the serum IgE test for alpha-gal is a simple blood draw that measures the allergy antibody in the blood. In research, we can do skin testing. Most clinical allergists like myself, unless we're doing research, don't do skin testing to the beef products. We just rely upon the serum IgE in the history, because that's all we need to confirm the diagnosis. Once we've confirmed the diagnosis, then we got to talk about how do we prevent further reactions. And unfortunately, at this time, the only treatment we have for any food allergy is avoidance of what you're allergic to. In the case of alpha-gal, that means you got to avoid mammalian meat, or beef, pork, venison, lamb, anything that has fur, you can't eat. And that's the unfortunate thing. And I'm sure my grandfather was rolling in his grave because he was a butcher. And so he'd be like, who can't eat a steak? But at the same time, that's how we prevent future reactions and future attacks. Ingestion of the food is the main danger with alpha-gal. Any food allergy is through ingestion. So through the ingestion of the food, if you accidentally ingest what you're allergic to, then you can develop anaphylaxis. But the other important thing with food allergy, especially with alpha-gal, you have to carry an epinephrine auto-injector. Because we know that while avoidance is the key with alpha-gal or any food allergy, accidental exposures do occur. And so that's where using an epinephrine auto-injector comes into play. You have to recognize those signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis if you've had an accidental injection and be able to treat that. And so here in the US, we have multiple epinephrine auto-injectors available. I'm not going to really talk about these, but just know there are different devices. Okay, some of you all may recognize EpiPens. There's also generics for the EpiPen. And then there's a couple, this is called an Adrenoclick, and this is called an AviQ. So AviQ talks to you. EpiPen probably is the most, it's like Kleenex of the epinephrine world. And then it has this generic, and then the Adrenoclick. They all contain the same medicine. It's called epinephrine. And epinephrine is the only way that we have to treat anaphylaxis. So besides avoidance, it's early treatment if you've accidentally ingested something that contains mammalian meat, if you recognize that you're having anaphylaxis. So sometimes when my patients talk about alpha-gal, at least up in Louisville, they may feel isolated. And I always tell them, this is a global problem. This isn't a Louisville, Kentucky problem. This isn't a Kentucky problem. This is a global problem because it's been recognized in Australia, it's been recognized in Europe, it's been recognized in Asia, it's been recognized now in other parts of the world, so we know that this is not a localized problem. But if you look at the map of the US, which I've got on the board here, man, a lot of it's in the southeast, right? So we're right about here. So Tennessee, Arkansas, down there's the Appalachian Trail over here with the, through North Carolina, South Carolina. So what does this really tell us? Well, we have a high density of ticks. And so another clue that gave us an idea of why ticks were involved is if you overlay Rocky Mountain spotted fever over this map, it basically matches up identical. So rickettsial diseases, which are tick-borne diseases, overlays this map very well. So unfortunately, in Kentucky, we live in an area that's really, that has a lot of ticks. And we're going to be exposed, especially if you have outdoor activity. And so what can we do to prevent alpha-gal? If you already have alpha-gal, unfortunately there is no treatment other than avoidance and carrying your epinephrine auto-injector in case you were to have maximal exposure. But if you don't have alpha-gal, this is where primary prevention really comes into play. Because again, if you're allergic, you're always at risk of developing food allergy. And unfortunately, that includes alpha-gal. So most of these are common sense that we deal with. And since we don't take the time to do it when we're doing our daily activities, but covering up, wearing shoes, wearing long pants tucked into your socks, trying to wear those long sleeve shirts on those hot days when you're doing yard work, collecting limbs, hats, trying to wear something to cover your head. Because if you ever see what ticks do, they kind of hang out on the edges of tall grass, on the edges of leaves, and they kind of just hang there. Kind of just float, and just kind of hang out their two legs looking for that thing to brush up against them and kind of attach to. The other thing we can do, and this is probably the most important thing, is you can actually treat your clothing with permethrin, which is a chemical that has been shown to repel ticks. You can even, if you're a hunter, you can even buy some of these that are pre-treated. And then using a high concentration of DEET, 20% or higher, I'm sure our entomologists later will talk a little bit about avoidance. But using a higher concentration of DEET has also been shown to be helpful. How can you tick-proof your yard? Well, keeping it cut, trying to clear away brushy piles in the shade, kind of put them in the sun. They like shadier spots, cooler spots. And then after you're done with outdoor activity, you want to make sure that you're kind of checking yourself. Check your skin. Do you have any ticks? Most ticks won't immediately attach. They'll kind of hang out and find a good spot to kind of attach to. If you do have a tick, you want to brush that off. You want to not really squeeze the tick. You want to kind of brush it off. You want to grasp it near its mouth parts. And then sometimes showering helps kind of remove any kind of loose ticks that you don't see that could be on your body. And so showering is always a good idea, that if you come in from any outdoor activity, to go ahead and shower immediately to kind of rinse off any of those loose ticks, especially those seed ticks. So seed ticks are so tiny, you're really not going to see them until you've kind of already been bit. And so again, prevention is the key with further tick bites. The biggest question I get of patients that have alpha-gal is there ever going to be a time that I can eat meat again? And we don't really know. We don't have a treatment yet for food allergy, especially for alpha-gal. So we don't know. It's been reported that there are people that do have resolution over time through avoidance of other tick bites and avoidance of alpha-gal in mammalian meat. So the key thing is big avoidance and further tick avoidance. I think probably in our lifetime we're going to have a treatment for alpha-gal. We just don't have that kind of protocol or that therapy yet available. But I do think that we're making a lot of headway with food allergy. This is a unique type of allergy, and so it may not be as soon as some of the other ones, but we're getting closer every day to having therapies for alpha-gal or for food allergy. Probably includes alpha-gal down the road. So trying to keep it as short and as simple as I could, because in reality, it's, once you got it, you got to avoid and carry your epinephrine auto-injector. Further avoidance of tick bites and further avoidance of mammalian meats, and hopefully those IgE levels or allergy antibodies go down over time. Avoidance of hidden foods. So hidden foods would include like soup, sauces. So there's a lot of hidden foods that contain mammalian byproducts or gelatin. And so you have to be if you have food allergy, it doesn't really matter what type you have, but you have to be a good label reader. And I always tell my patients that if you don't know what's in it, it's probably best not to eat it. The other thing that I didn't really touch on with alpha-gal 2 is there are a small population of people that have alpha-gal that can't drink milk. So cow's milk, there are certain people that can't do cow's milk because of what's called lactoalbumin, which does contain a little bit of alpha-gal in, it can be seen in cow's milk. And so, you know, certain people can do cow's milk, certain people can't, and that's on an individual level. And unfortunately, the only way to know that is really through history. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody would be having before we hear from our entomologist tonight. Yes, ma'am.
So they don't seem to react as much to chicken and fish, it's more the fur and...
Well, once you have alpha-gal, you have to, and that's a very good point, you have to switch your diet to what I call feathers and scales. So, unfortunately that's true. So you can ingest fish, shellfish, poultry. I have a couple patients that swear that they love their steak, and there's a place down in Nashville that actually farms emu, and they swear that the emu, and I've yet to taste this, but they swear that these emu steaks taste the closest to an actual beef steak. But I can't swear by that, but the picture that this person brought in looked like a medium rare steak. Yes, ma'am.
To be more specific, as far as what you can and can't do, because I have had it 4 or 5 years. Anesthesia, like if you're going to the dentist, I mean, so many medications are cultured in pork and whatever, and you don't know which ones.
Yeah, well, actually, they can find out through the manufacturer which ones do contain mammalian byproducts. And so that really, you're right, it becomes very tricky because there are a lot of products, especially within medicines that do contain gelatin. And so there are ways of finding that out. There's been rare reports, and you bring this up about medication, like the medical community and having surgery or having procedures done. There are rare reports. There's suture material called cat guts. There are rare reports, and I say this because there's really only 3 reports that are reported in the literature that people have problems with the cat gut sutures. And so I would tell you that if you're my patient, that if you are going to have a procedure, that you need to talk extensively with your anesthesiologist, with your surgeon about that condition, and have them reach out to someone that may be able to help them make those decisions if they don't know.
Well, when you mentioned gelatin, now they even have it, if you avoid the capsules for vitamins, now they have it in individual capsules.
Well, the problem with you looking at gelatin is gelatin can be mammalian, or it can be it can be vegetable based as well. So there's certain seaweed products that they use for gelatin, and so not all gelatin is mammalian based. And so that where you have to you have to like the pharmacist or your physicians can reach out and find out if there are kind of mammalian byproducts in those particular medications, because they are required by report those to the FDA.
And how about rennet and cheese?
I'm sorry?
Rennet and cheese, that's
Well,
cow's belly.
yeah, so again, this is where it's on an individual basis. There are people that can ingest cow's milk or cheese without problems, and there are a percentage of people that cannot. And we don't really understand that. We also know that there are people out there that have alpha-gal that they may be fine eating it, and I would never suggest this of any of my patients, but speaking frankly, there are people out there that swear they can eat a small amount of like a beef fillet, which is very lean, and be okay. But they eat that T-bone steak, that's gonna be a big problem for them. So the risk to me for food anaphylaxis is not worth taking a chance to eat that fillet. Because to me, when we talk about food allergy anaphylaxis, this is like trying to predict tidal waves. Most tidal waves aren't the big tidal wave that are gonna come and get you. But if the big one hits, you're gonna be in trouble. So we treat all reactions very similar in the sense that I can't predict if this is gonna be a life-threatening reaction or a mild reaction. What I can tell you is if you eat mammalian meat and you have a reaction, you need to treat with that method. Yes, sir.
Is this alpha-gal Rocky Mountain spotted fever is related?
It's not. So Rocky Mountain spotted fever is actually it's actually an infection that you pick up from a tick. So it's a bacterial infection that you get from a tick. Whereas alpha-gal is just a sugar that is seen in mammals that when the tick bites us, it's injected into us, and some of us can develop an allergy to that.
On Rocky Mountain spotted fever, I know I've got it, but you can't eat red meat.
Well, with Rocky Mountain spotted fever, that's going to be something. So Rocky Mountain spotted fever usually is going to be an infection that we treat with antibiotics. It's one of those rickettsial diseases, which would allow you to go on to eat red meat. But with alpha-gal, now unfortunately you can get Rocky Mountain spotted fever plus alpha-gal. So with Rocky Mountain spotted fever, it's an infection that we treat with antibiotics, and that resolves after the antibiotics. It can make you very sick, but it's something that does resolve that you can go on to develop, or can go on to eat red meat. But with alpha-gal, that's when you can't go on and eat red meat.
Well, I know a lot of people that Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and they can't eat red meat because if they do, they have a reaction to it. Some people's throats close up and they can't breathe.
That's probably alpha-gal because again, both of them are tick-borne. So again, you can be very unfortunate and develop Rocky Mountain spotted fever because it's a tick-borne disease, and alpha-gal, which is an allergy that you kind of make. And so you can actually have both, and that's really unfortunate. But the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, once it resolves through the use of antibiotics, that would actually allow you to go on to eat red meat. But the people that develop the alpha-gal parts, they could not go on to eat red meat. So
After I had it, I went to the doctor, and I wasn't eating red meat. I was feeling fine. I asked him about eating and trying it again. So he took a blood test to see whatever it was in it. And I think it was about 20 or something like that. So I went back to eating red meat. It didn't hurt at all. We went back a couple weeks later and another blood test. But what it was in my blood system, I got all the way back up. So it's more red meat.
that would probably be the alpha-gal antibody. That would be my guess. Yes, sir.
I survived after 2.5 years. I finally was able to go to Outback, have a a nice steak dinner. Is your system compromised in any way with alpha-gal so that if you get bit again a second time, is it gonna be easier, or do we start from square one again?
That's an excellent question. And I would say that once you have produced that antibody to alpha-gal, and while you can now tolerate red meat, you always have the propensity or chance that you may develop this again in the future. And sure, the tick bite may facilitate that. But the answer is we don't. You're one of the few cases that, yeah, resolves. And we don't know why that is, and we also don't know, there's a lot of unknowns. And I speak very frankly, I wish I could give you a definitive answer, but you're not compromised in the sense that your immune system is not working to protect you. What allergy is an abnormal response to something that you should just kind of ignore. And so in a way, it's reacting to stuff that shouldn't react to it at all. And so once you have that mechanism in place, even though you're tolerating or being able to eat red meat, you're always have a chance of developing that again.
So there's a point at sometime, like I say, after 2.5 years, I would eat red meat. But is there a time that if I'm not rebitten someplace, that I'm gonna have a hamburger and have the same problem?
So the answer is, I wish I could tell you the definitive, and the answer is I don't know. Because again, what I can say is you're one of the lucky few that this is resolved. There's other people that I see that have had this for longer than 2 years that haven't resolved. So we don't know what makes that resolve for certain people and others don't resolve. But for you, it has resolved. And so I can't tell you that getting bit by a tick would increase your risk, but I think it theoretically probably would. So it's always best to not get bitten by a tick again. But the answer is we just don't know.
Well, in desperation, I took "What's for dinner tonight" poster out of my kitchen when I had the bite. Put up my stuffed turkey or whatever. And, it's a great time, and the advantage of becoming a vegetarian is certainly in your favor. But
well, there are, for those people that struggle with trying to find alternatives to beef, there are really good recipes out there for an assisted change, for like turkey chili, or, if you like spaghetti, there's turkey spaghetti. And as weird as that sounds, once you start adding in those sauces, really, you never really miss that new flavor. You're finding alternatives to the meat products. And I know that can be very difficult, but most Walmarts, most Krogers do have those products now available. I think if this would have been 20 years ago, we would have had a lot of problems. But the good thing is we do have alternative products that are available. And because of the internet, we also have access to the emu steak. And so I'm not promoting that at all, but I mean, that's something that probably, again, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had availability of that. But it's something worth trying if that is something that's important to you.
You talk about the tick, another tick bite. Do all of the Lonestar ticks carry this particular?
Well, it's not a disease. So it's unlike Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which is a disease that, it's a bacteria that you're exposed to in the tick saliva. Alpha-gal is just a sugar that, because they took a bite of that cow and now they took a bite of you, you're being exposed to alpha-gal sugar, which you would normally not be exposed to.
I understand that, but that doesn't mean that all Lonestar ticks have that or does it. I mean,
I think we don't know that, but there's the potential there for them all, from their previous meal, to have had, have the alpha-gal in their system. And it's not just Lonestar ticks, it's really now been recognized just as a tick disease. That's why we see it in other parts of the country, other nations, because like Australia, they don't have a Lonestar tick. Maybe I should leave that to the entomologist, but the Lonestar tick was really the first that was identified and seems to be really the culprit here in the southeast. But we do see this in other areas that don't really have the density of Lonestar ticks or don't have Lonestar ticks. And so it's a tick disease, not really as much as the Lonestar tick has really been labeled the bad guy. It's just a tick and now sugar disease.
Sounds like a great opportunity for an alpha-gal cookbook.
There are some available. There's Facebook groups, there's a lot of resources on the web that are available. There is a cookbook that is available. I haven't looked through it yet, but there is a cookbook that I know is available through one of the support groups. Yes, ma'am.
In some of these alpha-gal groups, different people say that they have had a reaction to inhaling, like breathing beef, pork, while it's cooking. Like for instance, if I work in the school,
Right.
It hasn't bothered me yet. Is there
Well,
inhalation or is it ingestion?
This is where I think the disadvantage of the internet really comes into play, because I think there's a lot of myths out there that also are propagated through, even physicians. And so food allergy really is through ingestion. The aerosolization of alpha-gal, as far as I know, does not occur. So even under high heat, that sugar molecule probably gets what we call denatured or broken down enough where it doesn't cause problems. But ingestion is probably the biggest issue. Yes, sir.
I've had 2 incidents of reactions from the alpha-gal sugar. And actually, last year, I was around where a pork or a pig was being
Slaughtered.
well, no, it was being roasted pig. And about 3 hours afterward, I experienced a different kind of reaction where my mouth swelled. And I think it was very evident it was related to the inhaling the pork while it was roasted.
Yeah, I think, and then again, these kind of go back to case reports. It's kind of like the sutures. We have reports that most people can have probably catgut sutures, but there are a few cases that we can't explain. And so what I can say is really ingestion is the biggest danger. I can't really explain that, but ingestion is the biggest danger. Yes, ma'am.
One other question. A lot of people probably fool with cattle also.
For sure. Yes.
And I raise calves, and I know it's ingestion. But for instance, saliva, accidentally saliva or feces or something, if you come in contact with that and eat.
Well,
It's not the meat.
Right, so I think,
It's a
okay, so
possibility.
this is where it does get a little bit more difficult.
Okay.
So one of the probably early, and this is where history of medicine, I guess, is also important. One of the early, probably initial recognitions of alpha-gal before it was called alpha-gal was something called cat-pork syndrome. Because there are people that are real alert to the cat, that when they would eat pork, they would have anaphylaxis. And they never really made that connection. But what we do know is there are people that have cat allergy that alpha-gal can actually be seen on the cats, like as if it's actually pulled out of the cat. There's a little bit of alpha-gal there. Now, is that enough to cause anaphylaxis? No. Is it enough that if you rub it on your skin to have problems? Well, you probably have hives just like you would a skin test. But it's probably not enough to cause anaphylaxis. So going back to your cow example,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, I think that there's the potential of it. You don't always want to wash your hands and be careful, but really, hopefully, hopefully we're not dealing with a lot of cow saliva and going and eating very much before that, for hand washing. But I think the biggest danger, again, is ingesting beef products, beef, pork, venison, lamb. Ingestion of those products is really the biggest danger. Yes, ma'am.
Everybody that I know with this is an adult. Are you seeing it in her children getting it as much too?
Yes, this particular disease has no age limit. So the extremely young and extremely old can develop this allergy. And yes, I do take care of a couple of kids that do have this. Yes, ma'am.
How many patients that have tested positive for alpha-gal but continue to eat red meat with no symptoms?
That's a tricky one. Yes. I mean, that's where, unfortunately, we at this time, that's going to be advised. And we do, again, it goes back to the example I used. We have people out there, this tends to be more so than other food allergy, very dose dependent. So that small amount of filet probably doesn't contain as much alpha-gal as a triple cheeseburger with bacon. And that's a real life example of someone that anaphylaxed somebody. So, there's going to be different concentrations within the beef itself of the alpha-gal sugar. And because of that, there are people out there that probably can tolerate certain types of red meats without having anaphylaxis. And so that's where history comes into play too, and really what we call a food challenge. That's really done in research, but a lot of people will undergo a prolonged food challenge where they give you, the way UVA used to do it was they give you a certain amount of sausage patties in the morning and they'd watch you all day. And they may do this over a series of days where they challenge you with a certain amount each day. And so it's very dose dependent, whereas most other food allergy is small amounts. This tends to be more dose dependent than any other food allergy we have. That's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
When I was diagnosed, I was told to watch my hygiene products, to watch what was in them. I mean, so you're saying just.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there are animal byproducts in certain cosmetics and certain shampoos, and there have been case reports of people having localized skin reactions to those, but it doesn't cause anaphylaxis. And so.
I don't know what since I have through like a new product, if I introduce a new product to my life, it's like buttons off my pies.
Yes.
I don't know if it's that or not, that's something else.
Yeah, so again, these are very, very few cases that people talk about animal byproducts and shampoos or detergents. I mean, I always say, that's a very difficult situation. Really, it's avoidance of ingestion. That's the biggest key. That's the current kind of gold standard that we use right now. Yes, ma'am.
One upside to this, I have a friend who has a child in Russell Springs that developed the alpha-gal, and within a year's time, he is now eating red meat and has no problems.
Yeah,
So,
again, that's a case by case. Right now, we don't have what I call the definitive, yes, you can eat it, no, you can't. And this is true of all food allergy. It's not, these things are not as yes and no as I would like, or you all would like for them to be. It's history, and it's history with a confirming diagnosis that is through the blood work that helps us confirm the diagnosis, but it's the history. And if you've had anaphylaxis, I think that it's the risk you take. If you've had one episode, you're more than likely going to have another episode. And we don't have what I call a threshold yet established where this is where most people will be okay, and above this, everybody else is not. And so further down the line, that's probably going to happen. Because we do see people over time start to lose that antibody with further avoidance of, again, the further avoidance of tick bites.
It seems to be what I'm not sure, exactly how long or when he was diagnosed, but I've known them that amount of time. And he seems to have recovered from that, or whatever. She said, he didn't have it anymore, and he was eating what he wanted and not having any problems. So hopefully maybe he has.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always, again, there's always hope that at some point, I think, and again, we just don't have that, what I call threshold yet, or speed limit at which we would say, yep, you're below this is when we can start to think about introducing like red meat again.
I think we might have time for one more question before we switch gears. Any other questions? Have one right here.
I have it, and my question is, how often should you get your levels checked?
That is an excellent question. There's no set guidance yet. I mean, I generally check them on a yearly basis in my practice. And what you may find, this isn't meant to be discouraging, there may be some years that it looks higher than the next year. And so this can go up and down. And so what we want to see is a downward trend over time. And so these levels can remain elevated for long periods of time. So there isn't a set recommendation. It's just usually we check them on a yearly basis.
My allergy doctor, I was told, she told me I didn't come back for a year. And I thought, well, that sounds.
Yeah, generally, I mean, it's much, so I don't think that that's inappropriate unless you have further questions. Because generally, once the diagnosis is established and the history is consistent with alpha-gal, other than avoidance, there isn't a therapy we're going to put you on. And we generally will recheck that blood work in about a year. So that may be what that particular allergist is planning on in a year of doing. And again, at that year mark, you should also be getting another epinephrine auto-injector, because these things do expire. They're not good forever.
Everybody get something.
Well, thank you all very much for your time.
Handout that gives you something just about what I'm going to talk about as far as repellents and some of the treatments that are available for protecting yourself from ticks. And I'm just going to go through this a little bit. You can see the Lonestar tick is our biggest tick problem in Kentucky. It's the greatest nuisance tick we have. It is over, when I first started working at the University of Kentucky, you really only saw them in the land between the lakes area of western Kentucky. And in that time, it has spread across Kentucky up into the northeast. It has increased its range. It's been moved around by deer. You can see kind of what's happened with it in just the last 25 to 30 years. There's 2 times a year that you can run into Lonestar ticks, and there are different stages that are active each time. The life cycle of this tick takes about a year. And so you can run into them as early as March in the spring. And then there's a little bit of a drop off in midsummer, and then a large peak of them in August and September. We'll see what's going on with that. But virtually through the summer, they're around, and the Lonestar tick, like the American dog tick, is a 3-host tick. That means it feeds on 3 different animals during its lifespan and spends probably a total of about 3 weeks feeding out of that entire year. The rest of the time, it's laying down on the ground someplace, digesting its food, shedding its outer covering to grow again. And so it's really tied to being on the ground, and that's where sunlight and dry air are its real enemies. So one of the main things in trying to manage ticks around your property is to try to keep areas where you're active or kids are active, keeping it mowed short so the sunlight can get in there, the humidity doesn't build up. Earlier I mentioned seed ticks. this is the big time, the last part of the summer. Female Lonestar tick lays somewhere around 3,000 eggs. And she lays them in one batch on the ground. And so one of the worst things that can happen is you wander through and stand right in this area right after those eggs have hatched. And this occurs during July and August. So that's when the seed ticks are active. They'll try to get a blood meal. If they can't, they're going to spend the winter on the ground and become active again in the spring. So if we have mild winters, that favors survival of ticks. That means that more of them will survive the winter. If it's really cold, but we've got a snow cover, that will favor them too. So winter has a big impact on their survival. The Lonestar tick is a little different than the dog tick, which was mentioned a little bit. All stages of the Lonestar tick, and there are 3 of them, from a tiny 6-legged stage to the seed ticks, an 8-legged nymphal stage, and then the adults. Each one of those has a blood meal. All stages of the Lonestar tick feed on all size of animals and humans. They even feed on ground-nesting birds. So this is a tick that doesn't have trouble finding a meal. Most anything that comes by is fine with it to feed on. And because of that, it can also pick up diseases from animals and transfer them to humans. Now, this is the seed ticks, or some people call them turkey mites. They're the newly hatched 6-legged larvae. This lets you see one on the head of a pin that's already had its blood meal and swollen up. If you can see, all these little grayish spots on that part of a leg are seed ticks. This is someone who just walked through after a batch of eggs hatched. And those seed ticks then are going to cling on. They're going to start to crawl upward, and they're going to look for a place to attach to feed. This stage feeds for about 2 days and drops off. The next stage feeds for about 2 days. The last stage, the adults feed, they'll stay attached for a week if you don't find them. The irritation, the saliva that ticks inject as they feed, keeps blood from clotting. It lets blood flow around the area where they're feeding, and it's very irritating. So we get a lot of itchiness and redness just from the saliva that they release. This is a female Lonestar tick, just to show you how much they increase in size as they feed. She will take her almost 2 weeks to swell up completely with blood and expand her body. Now, how do we get ticks? Ticks don't see very well. They know that we're there from carbon dioxide that we give off as we breathe. They'll feel the vibration as we walk nearby. If we stop for a little bit, they may feel the warmth off our body. Those are the kinds of clues that they use to tell that we're nearby. And this is what they'll do, is climb to the top of a grass blade and hold those front 2 legs out and just latch on as we go by. Now, they're going to find us and get on us if we walk where they're located. So we're going to have to protect ourselves from giving them a place to attach. And light-colored clothing, if you're going to be working in areas where ticks are active, if you're going to be cleaning out brush along a fence row, if you're going to be hiking or camping or hunting outdoors, the kinds of things that you can do to make yourself more aware of ticks is light-colored clothing will let you see them more easily. The little seed ticks are difficult to brush off, but a small section of duct tape that you can just fold over your hand and blot and pick ticks off is a good way to deal with the large numbers of those tiny ones that are there. What it comes down to is they're going to find us because of our movement or our carbon dioxide. Our defense against them is really repellents. And the two types of repellents that are available to put on your skin to keep ticks from attaching, one of them is DEET, the other is a chemical called Cooperative. DEET has been around since the 40s. It has a long history of being an effective repellent. It's an oily kind of product, and so some people don't like it because it gives an oily feel to the skin. Cooperative doesn't have that oiliness. So there are products that you can look for, and there's an EPA website. If you just search on EPA repellents, there's actually a program you can go through. Say, I'm most concerned about ticks, how long you're going to be out. It will help you select the type of repellent that will be most effective for you. New repellents are going to start to have on their label approximately how long they'll protect you against particular pests. 4 hours for mosquitoes, maybe 6 hours for ticks. So it gives you an idea of what sort of protection they can give you. That's only going to be put on exposed skin. You don't want to put the pellet underneath clothing. Put it on exposed skin. The best way to keep ticks off of you, in addition to dressing with long pants and boots, is to use the permethrin, and it's listed on your sheet there. This is a clothing treatment that you can buy at hunting stores, at box stores. You spray it essentially from the knee down and on your boots. And as you walk by where ticks are active and they cling onto your clothing, they'll drop off relatively quickly before they get to the skin and start to feed. So clothing protectants are really effective if you're going to be in places where you're almost certain to run into ticks. Those repellents will last for several weeks on clothing. So if you've got work clothes or hunting clothes that you're going to be out in, you can spray them when you take them off, hang them up. Don't run them through the washer, and that will give a longer period of protection for them to work. So repellents are going to be the first line of defense you have, and clothing treatments. The next one is to check yourself and people with you often. Now, big brothers probably do that for little brothers no matter what. But the idea is if you check yourself regularly, frequently ticks will crawl around for some time before they actually settle and feed. So if you look regularly, you'll be able to find them and remove them before they settle in. Once a tick settles down, it's got a barbed mouth part that it puts into your skin, and it has a cement that it secretes so that after it's been feeding for an hour or so, it's locked into place and really difficult to get off. Along the hairline, back of the legs, around the waist, under the arms, in the groin area are all places where ticks tend to settle, where there's blood vessels near the surface, so it's easy for them to get a blood meal. And the trick is, here is the part of the mouth part of the tick that goes into your body when it feeds. And you can see those backward pointing barbs. So once it's attached, it is really difficult to remove them. You're just going to try to get them as close to the skin as you can with some tweezers and use a nice gentle pull to detach it and pull it off. You don't want to use lighter fluid or matches or Vaseline or gasoline. Any of those kinds of things irritate the tick and actually will tend to cause it to salivate more, which is just going to increase the problem that you have with the bite. So once they're attached, that gentle pull is the important part, and then washing that area with soap and water is good to prevent an infection. You can buy little tools that are supposed to help you get ticks off. They're as good as forceps, but certainly not any better. So personal protection while you're out is extremely important. In terms of protecting yourself around your property, the main thing is to think about areas next to woods or tall overgrown vegetation. There's usually about a 10-foot swath there around the edges of overgrown or wooded areas where ticks are most likely to occur. They ride along on their host and they drop off, typically along areas where animals are going to be moving, or areas where they bed down or spend some time, or areas where they come to feed. So keeping these areas in particular clipped so sunlight and humidity, or sunlight penetrates and humidity is low, is going to help keep ticks away. Things like bird feeders or pet food that's left out are going to attract animals that can come in that can bring ticks into the yard. So it's important to reduce those kinds of attractive things as much as possible. So keeping areas clipped is important. If you want to use insecticides, if you have problems with ticks in certain areas, there are a number of products that are available to treat lawns and turf areas, and it will say it right on the label. Many of the products that are labeled for trees and shrubs also can be sprayed on grasses. This is just a list of some of the common names of those insecticides that are available. And then if you're going to do that, the main thing in reducing problems with ticks is just habitat manipulation. That sunlight, low humidity, keeping animals away from areas as you can. Insecticides may be something that you can do if you had a lot of ticks in an area and you want to knock them down. The red on here represents the ticks, so many of them are down on the ground, some crawl up on the vegetation. The blue is water spray. So if you're going to spray areas for ticks, it's important to use enough water, not just to get the grass wet, but also to get that water and spray material down to the surface, because that's where the ticks are going to be laying if they're not up looking for food. You can use sprays. There also are granular insecticides that can be spread around in areas where ticks have been active. The granular insecticides need to be watered in or applied just before a rain in order to make them most effective. Ticks are an increasing problem for us in Kentucky. Mild winters have been part of the reason for it. Their survival is better. The small animals that they feed on as part of their life cycle are better. Our wildlife has a big impact on providing food for ticks and for moving them around. And one of the things that, this is a picture from Grayson County, deer with ticks behind the ear there. In 1945, they estimated the deer population in Kentucky to be somewhere around 2,000. Now the population is somewhere between 700,000 and 1 million. These have been important animals, as well as the coyotes who come through, in moving ticks around into new areas. And so that helps with the spread of the Lonestar tick. It also is important in movement of a new tick that we have in Kentucky called the black-legged tick. And that's one that we're watching because it's just shown up in Kentucky in the last 4 years that we've noticed it, and one that has a potential health impact as well. So I'll just will be short with this. It's most important for self-protection to protect yourself as you go into tick-infested areas, both with the clothing you wear, the repellents you use, and the clothing treatments that are possible to help protect you. I think I can answer any questions you have about these treatments or fixing the shelter. I think you've heard a lot of information tonight, and a lot to kind of think about. Yes, ma'am.
The lawn treatments, with different chemicals, are they safe around domestic animals like dogs and cats?
Yes, for treatment of an area, and that would only be if you definitely had tick problems in the area. What the labels will say is the area, the spray should be dry before animals go on to it. And once the spray is dry, the chances of them picking it up are very slim.
Does that kill the ticks?
It will kill the ticks, yes. Those insecticides will kill the ticks. And there are treatments and collars for dogs and cats that are out in lottery to pick up ticks. Anything else?
That sounds, this is a serious question.
I understand that.
Have you seen anything to substantiate the claim that possums will lose 5,000 ticks per season?
I have not asked a possum that would admit to that.
I was just thinking, in addition to chemicals, we could all get some possums.
One of the problems with ticks, or one of the reasons we have problems with ticks, is they don't have any natural enemies. Now, guinea hens are supposed to be something that will feed on them, but they're going to get engorged ticks, large ticks. They're not going to see and pick up unengorged or small ones. So there's some indication that guinea hens will cut down on numbers of blood-fed ticks. But possums is a new one on this.
Seriously, if you Google that, there's all kinds of substantiated claims.
We don't have time to learn all the things that Google can teach us.
I don't know who counted how many.
Well, that's another part. Right.
How about armadillos?
Armadillos are, I've not heard much about them for ticks. I know they can carry them. Have you seen armadillos?
Well, no, but I was living down at the Tennessee border.
Yeah.
They were coming.
Armadillos are beginning to move
Oh, yeah.
east and north. And so that's,
Maybe we need them.
I'm not sure. Anything else? If not, I'll be here for a few minutes. Nick, I'll turn it back to you.